And we are recording. So anybody who's on the phone, we are recording. Everything you say will be a part of history. How are you?
Hi, Rich Rogers.
Rich. Noel Coleman, nice to meet you. All right. So Tim, at your leisure, we can get rolling.
This is Allison. I'm sorry, I'm a few minutes late joining.
Hey, Allison.
So thank you for attending. This is an important tool for us. We have at GHS we have the homegrown provider directory that is functional but really suboptimal, and we really need an enterprise-wide tool that can serve a lot of masters and have a lot of control and make sure that we have the best data about our physicians as we can. And as we think about this again, so we need it a little bit more than Palmetto does, but we included Palmetto because we want to have it as an enterprise solution. So we have Noel Coleman from Doctor.com who has a solution for us, and this is going to be recorded, so we'll be able to watch it. If anyone couldn't come today, we'll send it out so that everyone can take part.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. So like Tim said, I'm Noel Coleman. I'm the president of Doctor.com. We're based out of Atlanta. Have been in the space of doing physician data and physician directories for a little over 25 years. So have a little bit of experience doing this stuff. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to walk everybody through a couple of things. I've got about 7 or 8 slides just to kind of give you a little bit of set a little context, and we're going to spend most of our time looking through the tool and talking about that. So just to give everybody a little bit of a sense, what the premise behind Doctor.com and the provider connection system that we'll talk about today is that when you look at the consumer journey, part of a patient experience, that today it looks a lot like a buying process in other industries, and I'm sure everybody's probably sick of hearing the word consumerization and all that stuff for healthcare. But the reality is that it's beginning to look a lot like that. So, everything from identifying they have a need to being able to engage with content, whether to figuring out, do I need to take care of this right now, delaying care, not delaying care, evaluating options for how that might actually get taken care of. That buying process itself, and then of course there's the experience piece, and then hopefully done well, there is some opportunities for loyalty, referrals, follow-up visits, etc., and they're not frustrated and kind of come back and do this process again. So, but in order to really do this well, you have to understand how patients are looking for care, and this is a really important piece. First of all, the mobile phones have changed a lot of the way that people search. And when you look at mobile, really one of the key things is that we'll talk about this in a second, but voice search is significantly on the rise, especially searching Google. And so that matters for your data structure. And Google My Business and things like that, your own website being structured properly so that it's coming up at the top of searches as they do these mobile search is going to be really important. And again, kind of what's mentioning, there's a lot of, I call it hullabaloo about AI and voice search and Alexa and Google Home and these sorts of things. The reality is that right now they're not a significant portion of what it has to be concerned about, but in the next 5 to 7 years they will be. And making sure that none of this stuff, AI doesn't operate well, can't do anything if it doesn't have good, clean data. And the reality of it is that about 4 or 5 years ago, none of this was an issue anyway, and now it is. And so 5 years, 6 years from now, something else may be coming into play. And so making sure, you can see here, kind of a couple of stats about 1 billion voice searches being done daily. About almost half of adults do daily voice searches. And the question is the data future-proofed? So when Doctor.com built out provider connections, we really kind of built it out with this idea of future-proofing data, making sure that the structure was right, that it was clean, that it had the right processes. so that organizations could move away from this traditional hub and spoke model. So the traditional hub and spoke model, nothing wrong with it, it's an effective model, but it has this concept that we're going to be the center of the universe, and when you want information, you're going to come to us, and that's the only place you're going to get it. But the reality is something more like this, that consumers are all over the place. They're going to land, and they're going to go to Google, they're going to land on Healthgrades, they're going to go to Vitals, they're going to be on Google My Business, they're going to be getting feeds from Facebook, they're going to be getting friends on social media telling them what to do. So making sure that your data and your opportunities for conversion, like scheduling appointments and things like that, exist everywhere they are. So more of a syndication model means that you're making yourself more available where they are in the way they want, when they want, as opposed to that traditional model. So that being said, Provider Connections is a data platform. It is all about cleaning and consumerizing and syndicating your data. And this has various things it plays out with, like Find a Doctor, which is what we're going to talk about today. But then it also plays into other things like scheduling, reputation management, data management, listings management, making sure that your data is accurate across the web. So there's a lot of ways this plays out. And as part of that, one of the things that we actually, this is probably good for you guys to know. I know Palmetto has a relationship with Healthgrades. I was actually just on the phone with them this morning talking about various things. We have the broadest network of ecosystem of partners around these kinds of things, from Healthgrades to Vitals to Google to Bing to Yelp. We're Yelp's healthcare launch partner. So having those partnerships to be able to tie into the different strategies, both on your site and off. That being said, that's just a quick snap of it, kind of give you a sense of some of the organizations we work with. And from here, I'm going to spend the rest of our time actually in the tool. So before I get started, any questions on any of the stuff that we just talked about? No? Good. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Can you start over?
The good news is it's being recorded, so you can watch it as many times as you like.
Yeah, I apologize for being late. Sorry.
No worries. No worries. So to begin with, everything starts with having good data. And in 20 plus years of doing this, I've never run into a health system that has super clean data from the get-go. So that's almost kind of a given. Jesus. We're right in our sweet spot. So the gist of this is that there's a number of different ways that we help you clean up your data. So first of all, if you've got multiple data sources, which you inevitably do, we actually can work with you on taking that data. Our system is built with what I call the last mile being left open. So obviously we have built architecture to connectors and hooks, but then what we do is we leave that last mile open so that we can take your data in whatever format you've got it and work with you on saying, this, for example, Providence Health and Services is probably a really good example because they're just massively complex. But they have, let's say they've got 13 different data sets that we're pulling in that comprise 5 million records of various types. You might go there. But basically, so what we do is we actually will use things like NPI numbers, fuzzy logic, et cetera, to be able to match up all of the data and then pull that together and have a set of business rules and logic on top of it that says, might say things like, for example, for these data fields, this data set always wins. For this one, if this one has data, it wins. If not, then this other one wins. You can have translations of data because obviously if you have multiple data sets, things like specialties are probably named differently in each one of the data sets. And so being able to pull those together and then being able to cleanse that data through processes of deduping and things like that.
So you can handle the feeds from multiple, say, staff systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a pretty regular part of what we do. Now, once the data is in the system, I thought I'd show you a couple of things here. So there's three ways to edit data in our system. What's that?
Just trying our population health. I just wonder what their sources is.
Oh, okay. Would I hear Salesforce? We have pulled in data from Salesforce. So yeah, it is doable. Depends on how you have it structured. Their data set's not really designed for doctor data, so sometimes it can get a little bit wonky, but it's doable. But that being said, so there's three ways to edit data in our system. So obviously the first way is through data imports using your own existing data. The second way is going to be through administrator access to the data. So there's interfaces like this. So there might be things like, for example, marketers who need to add additional data that just doesn't exist in other databases, right? So you might have bios, you might have videos, photos, the things like that that don't exist. Being able to give them access to be able to update the data. There may be other folks who need to be able to have editing rights on fields that do come from other that exist in other data sets, but they need to be able to have overwrite capacities. Those can get a little bit complex, and that's probably part of a scoping process to figure out like the right way to do it for data governance. But having the ability to say, based on role, what fields are you able to get access to and edit? And then the third way is by inviting physicians in to make suggested changes. So I'm going to show you all of those pieces. But when you come through, and right now I have sort of all of the fields in the data set turned on for viewing and editing. So if there were fields that we didn't need, we would clean it up by removing those from the interface.
So each field, basically, you can set whether it can be edited by a physician or not?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think they would edit it, they would provide a
Suggestion, yeah,
and then
correct.
kind of-
Yeah.
Hey, Noel.
When I
Yes,
think
ma'am.
about a specialty, because we have that issue, some want to basically put like 5 different specialties. Others basically say, well, I don't like being called that, I like being called this.
Right, but we can maintain the integrity, but also have some more consumer friendly
Okay.
specialties and add those fields.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, doctors always
Noel.
have to go through an approval process. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick point. If somebody asks a question, do you mind giving a high-level repeat? It's a little bit harder to hear them away from the microphone.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So the question at hand there is that there's a way to control what fields physicians are able to suggest edits to, and the answer is yes. So, so there's one thing, I'll mention this and I'll come back to it in a second, but this is a really, 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 really important thing. We're going to spend a little bit of time on it. It's important to understand the data architecture for data like this. So in our system, there's 3 data entities to think about. There are people, there are places, and there are services. And so the way we sort of name these, the nomenclature in our system is providers, practices, and org units. And so I'll show you through these, but it's really important to understand that because not all systems have that kind of data architecture, and it does cause downstream problems if you don't have them. So, but real quick, there's also a taxonomy that underlies all of this. So for example, if a physician comes in and they want to make a suggested change, and like for example, we've got clinical interests in here. What they have the ability to do, as you can see here, is they have the ability to, based on their specialty, be shown a pre-built taxonomy of conditions, diseases, procedures, interests, and keywords. And so based on this doctor, this is a test doctor, so he has like 4 specialties, so there's lots of things in here. But you can actually have them be able to come in and see just the 50 procedures that might be applicable to them and allow them to be able to choose the ones that are most applicable to them, which of course then affects how specific people can be when they're looking to find a doctor. So if they're looking to find a doctor who is a knee surgeon, they can actually find a knee surgeon versus an orthopedic surgeon who is qualified to do it, but is not what they really do.
So you have consumer-friendly phrases or words that you can.
That's right. Taxonomies for all of those. Now, one thing that I'll also mention, and again, this kind of comes back to that partnership component of things. We are actively in the process right now of augmenting this taxonomy. So where we got this taxonomy from is by we've worked with a little over 150 hospitals nationwide on building these kinds of data sets. And so we've aggregated that up from a lot of the work that we've done there. But what we're doing now is with Healthgrades. Healthgrades sits on top of a CRM, as I think, Palmetto, I think you guys may use their CRM, am I right? Yeah.
We do.
You do, yeah. So like their CRM, a lot of their stuff that they're doing on their own national website, they're sitting on top of a lot of claims data, insurance data. They've aggregated all sorts of things. And so we're actually right now in the process of pulling that data into our system so that not only do we have the taxonomy to allow you to choose the right things for doctors, but we'll be able to proactively suggest to you, hey, Dr. Smith should have these 5 clinical interests because based on claims, this is clearly what that doctor does. And so being able to actually tie it to claims data and including those kinds of things in that interface. And one of the pieces we're building out right now is the ability for department heads or whoever the person is who sort of oversees a group of physicians, being able to have data hygiene tools. So they'll be able to see things like, for example, you've got 500 diseases that that your doctors could have listed in their profile. Here's 20 that are not being used at all, but based on claims data should be getting used by these doctors, right? Or on the other side of it, here's these 25 diseases that are claimed by everybody. So it's not really useful for consumers who are searching because it doesn't actually filter anybody. And here's the 20 people you should probably take off those based on claims data. So having that taxonomy built in and growing more robust. And again, you've got diseases, all sorts of things here. I've got a fair number in here right now just because, again, test doctor. But the ability to load in videos. Here, I'll go back to my general tab here.
And with online, how many of those do you want to
The diseases, clinical interest, et cetera. There's not like a hard and fast number that you should limit it to sort of arbitrarily. What it really comes down to is what is it that they actually do, right? So it's if a physician is coming in and they've claimed 75% of the clinical interest that they have access to, it's probably not true. So what they need to do is mostly focus on what do they do right now, right? Because most physicians are sort of micro factories to a certain extent in the sense that they have a very broad set of credentials that they are capable of doing. There's a smaller band that they do a lot of, right? So it's that plus anything that they're looking to get into. So they may be expanding the scope of their practice, and so you may add some things based on that. So it's not really a hard number as much as it is just a best practice. But yeah, being able to do those sorts of things, we're actually in the process right now of building in a tool of auto building bios, because sometimes it's really, really helpful. We find that physicians who have photos and bios get clicked on and converted about a 2 times rate of everybody else who doesn't. But bios can be somewhat difficult to capture just because doctors are difficult to pin down. And so we're in the process right now of taking all of the data that we have in the system and basically auto-generating a bio for them that, of course, then could be overwritten and edited. So you'll have the ability to have those come in whether you've captured the doctor long enough to get that or not. Now, I'm going to show you this on the backside, but then I'm going to spend a little time on it here. Actually, I'm going to go to the practice tool itself. So again, this kind of comes down to that data architecture. And thinking about it, so this is the places or the practices side. So the idea is that when a consumer is looking, sometimes they look for a person because they've gotten a referral and they're researching for a doctor and they're going through and evaluating the doctors. Sometimes, however, they're looking for a location, right? So they look for a location first and then, oh yeah, there's a doctor who's there who's going to do the thing. And then sometimes they're looking for a procedure and then they look for the person who's doing that procedure. So there's different pathways that patients take. And the problem in most databases that we've seen is that they think of things like location data as what is basically metadata on a provider's record, right? And instead, we actually have entities of these things. So for example, if I come into any one of these practices and show you this entity is treated like a person is. It has its own data attributes. It's got a type, it's got a name, it's got practice managers and contact information. There's philosophies and appointments and addresses, things like that. So this has some practical implications. For example, for anybody who would be manually updating data, obviously they could update an address in one place and it would populate across all the doctors attached to it. But then more importantly, because most people don't do it that way, they do it through imports and things like that. More importantly, what this does is it allows you to begin to be able to do things like, for example, if you want to control listings in Google and Yelp and places like that where they list the location, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to do if you don't have location entities in your data set, because it's very hard to know if there's 5 doctors who all practice at the same address, but they're all spelled a little bit differently, or maybe you have 100 doctors in a building and the only thing that's different is a suite number, then the sites, if you don't have those things as entities, it becomes very difficult to manage. It also becomes very difficult to do things like this. So Providence Health and Services is there's their health system out on the West Coast. This is their health plan. We do their directory for them. And like I was mentioning earlier, we pull about 13 data sets together. It's about 5 million records. One of the things that they've realized is that when people are coming through doing a search, they might want to look for a care provider, or they might look for a service or a place. And this, just based on analytics, is getting a lot of traffic coming to like the find a service or place. And when you're doing this, I can come in here and say, for example, I want to look for an ambulatory surgical center. And, when I come into the ambulatory surgical center, here, oh, here, I don't know why my internet connection went down. There we go. Let's see. No, there it goes. I just had to regen. That's all. So being able to come in here and actually see the locations themselves, and then being able to come in here, they're still working on making these the actual profiles robust, but being able to actually look at locations and having people be able to search by location is in fact a really important component of things. And the only way you get there is by having entities in the database that allow you that do that. So I harp on that because of the fact that it's really, really important. And in fact, if you think about it from a patient acquisition standpoint, when people search, a lot of people will talk about, hey, you can search on the doctor's name and we're going to come up first. That's great if that person has gotten so far down the care path that they've gotten a name, right? But most often, what people are starting with is best family doctor near me, or best orthopod near me, or best dermatologist near me. And when they do that, the things that's coming up is generally not a physician's profile. It's generally a little location, a service line page, something that is a unit that has multiple physicians attached to it. So in fact, if you even look at the third-party sites like Healthgrades, the reason they come up high in searches like that, at least on desktop, is because they actually do aggregate pages of doctors, and they call it something that Google recognizes.
That's cool. So
yeah.
How would you envision us organizing our view where, we're going to probably, one brand system, but two geographic locations, separate medical staffs, two distinct CINs. Is there a way of filtering that so that if I'm in Columbia, I'm not presented with primary care docs in Spartanburg?
Yeah. So we could actually, there's a couple different ways to do it. So of course we can use the browser to detect location and then show only doctors appropriate to their location. Couple challenges to that. One, they have to agree to let you use their location. And a lot of times people just hit block and won't let you use it. The other part of it is that, like for example, in my case, I work in downtown Atlanta. I live up in Cumming, which is about 45 minutes north. So if I'm doing a search for a doctor while I'm in Atlanta, it doesn't do me any good because that's not where I'm going to go. I'm going to be up in Cumming. So there are some inherent limitations to that. However, that being said, this again kind of comes back to that location entity piece, because one of the things we can do is we can actually have searches that allow this kind of like within 5 miles of, and we can actually do geolocation searches. So for example, if somebody does a search on an address, we're going to find out what the address or what the distance is from that address to the addresses of the doctors, as opposed to like a zip code search where somebody puts in a zip code. If you live in a zip code like I do, mine's very oblong, and it goes north to south. And so what a zip code search does, it goes to the geographic center of the zip code and looks 5 miles out from that. But I happen to live at the very bottom of it, and so 5 miles from that center of that zip code is not actually close to me. So we actually do more of a geographic or a geocode, so that we can actually go address to address. So, and I apologize for the folks on the phone. I forgot to repeat the question earlier. The question was, how we can, how the proposal would be to present the data so that the two different geographical locations could be used by consumers, whether that be a different interface or So now the other piece of this, so kind of I want to pause because it's really, really important for the back end piece. Any questions on the data, the architecture, the import processes, the data cleansing, the taxonomy, any of those components? All good? We're good. All right.
This is Nick Patel from
Hey, Nick.
I had a quick question. Do you guys sync up with online scheduling tools and solutions like Kairos? Because a large piece of that is having the database of the provider, and then being able to go, you find the provider, now you want to go ahead and schedule an appointment. Does this sync up with Kairos solutions or other online scheduling solutions?
Well, so the answer is yes, and so yes, we can connect in with other scheduling solutions. We've implemented things like Epic widgets or InQuicker, things like that. But the good news is that you don't actually have to have a separate system for that, which I'll come back to in a moment. But we actually have our own integrated scheduling solution.
And then what kind of security protocols do y'all serve? Do you guys, where's the data held? Is it locally, or you guys partner with another storage system service?
Yeah, so we actually have a data center down in Atlanta that we partner with, and so it's actually a place called Broad River. We have, I can connect you with our CIO who's got all of the security components. I will quickly get out of my depth if we start talking security technicalities, but I can assure you we've gone through rigorous testing on that. If anybody, Emory Healthcare put us through the ringer on that one. That one was exciting. So one thing, actually, real quick, and I'll mention this. So I know you guys work with Press Ganey and Binary Fountain on transparency. I went ahead and brought this one up just to show you. This is ChristianaCare. This is actually Binary Fountain's APIs. So we have implemented Binary Fountain's APIs for transparency and being able to see that. So that is something we can integrate with. Now, when it comes to the front end, I'm going to flip through a couple of these. We won't spend massive amounts of time doing this, but my point, what I want to make is that two things. Number one, we are probably one of the most flexible front-end solutions that I've seen. Most people who have a front-end solution, they have one front-end solution. And actually, Nick, you actually mentioned Kairos, so I'll sort of use them as a good example. They have a good solution, no doubt, but it is the same solution everywhere they are because they have a single interface and they do not play with it for anybody. And so what we do is we just recognize that that's not necessarily the solution that everybody's wanting. Again, being in this space for 25 years doing this kind of stuff, we just know that hospitals have their own needs. They want to tweak things. So our interface is 100% customizable on how we display things, on what we search for, on how we configure search, keyword searches. We do have all of your normal, kinds of things from, your type aheads, where I'm going to have, show me what I'm, typing in, kind of like the Google. The faceted type searches where you can kind of go primary care or specialist, picking specialties. All of these kind of normal facets. And then I can show you, we've got a ton of them. I think it's like 20 or 30 or so different facets we can put in place. Another component to this I'll mention. Our system is designed from the back end to be customizable in the sense that if you have custom fields that you want to add, you can add an infinite number of custom fields to the backside, and those fields can be included in any exports or APIs or things like that we're doing, including keyword searches and Booleans can be used for facets and that sort of thing. But the front end piece. The second piece of this I want to mention is that we do a lot of user testing. So we've gone through various iterations over time, and I won't go through all of the thought process behind it. But basically, the gist of it is that we've gone through a lot of testing, figuring out what works, what resonates with various users. And a good example of this is what you'll see a lot of times in today's more recent Find a Doctor tools is this sort of grid layout for provider profiles. We were the first in the country to do it because we began to realize that the primary person who was actually, there's a little bit sort of several steps of thought process. Google had done a study showing that people who look at websites form an opinion of the organization based on within the first 17 milliseconds. In other words, a gut reaction based on the look and feel of the site and how well it adapted to what they expected. Obviously, they don't form their expectations in healthcare. They form them other places like social media, e-commerce, etc. When you look at that, plus the find a doctor, most healthcare decisions are generally made by the female in the family. And so if you kind of look at that and you go, okay, where are females tend to be online to form their expectations for how the web should work? Start looking around. Pinterest was one that we kind of looked at. We're like, it's got an 80% female demographic. So how can we make the Find a Doc look and feel a little bit more like Pinterest? The infinite scroll is a bad idea for several reasons in Find a Doc, but this sort of layout was the first time we did it was with SluCare. It's a large medical group over in Missouri. And we did that, and within 6 months we had seen, I think it was roughly a doubling of time on site, number of click-throughs, and bounce rate had dropped dramatically. And so that became sort of a standard for how we did things. And these sorts of things we do all the time. We're in the middle of a massive redesign right now because of some user research we've done. Doing more guided searches. So like, for example, here, I've got, like UNC, adult specialist who specialize in, I'm just going to go family medicine just because it's a good one. And then the ability to actually have filters, and actually I'll show you an implementation of my screen. This screen here keeps going down on me. There we go. And then having the ability to do things like has online scheduling. And whenever I come in to take a look at the scheduling, so I can kind of walk somebody through a process pretty quickly. And as they come in, let's just find somebody who's got here. So like we'll do this. So schedule online. So there's a couple of ways. I'll kind of get a little bit ahead of myself and I'll mention this. So there's a couple of ways we can do scheduling. Let's see if he's got any appointments available. No, he does not. Sometimes the Epic widgets do that. But basically the way that we can do this is we can integrate with Epic or Cerner or whatever the case may be. We can do both. We can do both. And so basically integrate with those, and then we can have either the actual EMR's widget on the site, which is what's happening in UNC's case, or we can have our widget show up. A lot of times what we're doing, and this is what we're doing with Presbyterian Healthcare Services down in New Mexico right now, is we're putting our stuff on both their site and on the third-party web. But folks like UC San Diego, they have the Epic widget, and their IT department was very specific, like, we want the Epic widget here, and that was fine. And so what we're doing is we're layering on top of that the scheduling tool and having that on the third-party web that's our tool. Because that's something Epic, none of the EMRs do, and none of them want to. So we're able to do that. And just to give you a sense for why that can actually be useful, is when you're ready to do that, we can actually integrate. And the third-party web right now, from what we've seen, generally bring in about 50% of the appointments that come in. So it's a pretty significant number of it. So that kind of gives you an idea. This is an example of Brigham and Women's. You can see, this one again has that whole thing where I can type in something and it's going to start showing me what's available. Do the search. The faceted searches in their case are down the left-hand side instead of guided across the top like UNC's. We've got UC San Diego. So UC San Diego actually just won. I think they've actually got it on their site. Yeah, here we go. So they just won the eHealthcare Leadership Awards in 2017. Yeah. Yeah, so they actually won that. And actually, I was very proud of this one just because the other winners in this category were Mayo Clinic and Cleveland Clinic. So they were in really good company. And then of course we also do things like produce print on demand PDFs. So you can probably have some docs who still are kind of like, hey, I wish I had a print directory. Well, they can actually have a print directory. This produces a PDF of the search results, but it has a cover, table of contents, intro pages, physician section, like a traditional old school. We got our start 25 years ago doing traditional printed physician directories and mailing out hundreds of thousands of those all over neighborhoods and such. And so we as we evolved, we just kept that piece in a more modern way. So it looks like a very much like a traditional directory, but they can have it dynamically. And then this is just an example, again, of that kind of location search. So being able to have a search and profiles on the various locations. And this, again, is SluCare, the group I was mentioning earlier. And this is an example of our scheduling tool. So I won't spend a ton of time here, but I'll just kind of give you an idea. I'll show it to you in 3 different places, but the idea is that the interface looks very similar across all of them, and it is placed within the profiles, on the various sites or on your site, but these particular ones are on third-party sites. So like in Yelp, I can come in here, I can do my, choose reason for a visit, I can choose my insurance carrier and my plan, I can choose which doctor at the particular location I'm going through. Of course, I can pick my time and then come in. I can either do it for me or for someone else, and if it's someone else, I'll require the name. Have I seen this doctor before? Reason for the visit, and then creating a profile and hitting go. I won't do that and mess up their schedule because it's actually real. But that kind of approach also happens here. So if somebody Googles and they go, I want to book an appointment. Of course, in this case, this is an individual dentist. So for a health system, we would actually have that link be yours. But basically when they click, it's going to take them over here and have that same experience. So health grades.
So that requests an appointment, but doesn't actually put it on their schedule?
Yeah, so there's different ways to do this. So you can either have the system be a read-only, and what we're doing is we're reading the EMR, and then we're basically letting a person pick from what's available and then submitting it as a request. It's coming to a Doctor.Companion app that gets downloaded on the backside on their local computer, for then pops up notifications, and they can either say, yeah, they can key it in, the way that manually. But we can do more of an actual request where it's just they're saying Tuesdays and Thursdays between 2 and 4, I'll let you book appointments online, and it's a request. Or we can do the true read-write, right? So we're reading the EMR, we're taking the appointment, the doctor says, yes, I'll take that, and it's writing it right up into the EMR. So it can go either way. Most people, to be honest with you, start with a request, just because doctors have a hard time giving up control of their schedule. So it starts off really well as a request, but like in the case of a call center, you don't want it to be a request, you want it to be an actual read-write. So in those cases, we would actually make it a read-write probably from the get-go.
What if we're currently doing that in MyChart, and there people are scheduling? Can this point to MyChart?
Absolutely. So you can do something where, for example, you can have actually, see if I think. I'll use this one. This is not a client, but just because we were talking with Presbyterian about this yesterday, I have it top of mind because it would function the exact same way. So if you go to their docs, let's find somebody's got, yeah, here we go. They have, that's right. Not everybody has it. They have the button, but then it'll just give you a phone number. See if I can find somebody who's got it. Not a phone number. All right, we'll try one more. Yeah, it might be. Oh, there it is. Perfect. So, yeah, they actually, in this one, it's funny, this one actually has the MyChart, but they don't have the book a new appointment if you're a new patient. So what happens is that basically from here, basically what we would do is we pop up something and say, if you want to go to MyChart, you want to log in, here's the link. It probably is just a link instead of the login here. Just make it simpler for them. But if you're a new patient, another button shows up here and says, I'm a new patient, want to book an appointment. They click it, and then it takes them through the interface. So it can go either way. And in fact, we were actually talking yesterday specifically about Epic. We'd have to look at Cerner and see what it is. But we were looking at yesterday about taking, whenever somebody did book an appointment as a new patient, that there's some ways to then create the account in MyChart so that the next time they come in, they can come in through MyChart. So those are different components. So any questions on the front end? I want to make sure we got you. Any questions on the front end, the customization, the approach to the user experience, the scheduling?
No, I have a.
Yeah.
So I think it was Rich that was asking about, Cerner and Epic. So how would that sort of bifurcation happen when the user comes in to know I'm looking at a Cerner schedule versus an Epic schedule? Is it based off location, and that would be how that interface would work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would more than likely be based on location, and or provider in some cases. So it basically depend on. Do you guys have overlap? I would say. Okay, I say if you don't have overlap, it makes it a lot easier. So yeah, if you could do it, we could even do it by physician. So it just depends on which profile you're clicking on as to which one you're getting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is Richard Baldwin from Palmetto Health. I have a question.
Absolutely.
We haven't looked very much at the physician detail pages, and that's something that has come up over and over with our physicians. They don't like to be pigeonholed. They don't like the kind of grid layout where everybody's treated the same, and it's kind of limited, and the superlatives they want to highlight and the things they want to share. And we've had a few instances of some subspecialty physicians spinning up their own, free WordPress or something like that, to kind of fill a gap that they perceive. So I had some questions around what kind of flexibility you have from a design and layout standpoint when it comes to the physician detail pages.
Sure. Yeah. Fire away.
So what kind of flexibility do you have with
that was the question. Sorry, I apologize. That was so the answer is we can actually design this however you want to. So if I click into any one of these, here I'll go to a couple of them. So like this is Nemours, and the way that they did theirs is they've actually got the tabs. If you click, one of the ones I actually particularly like is like the about this provider. Because what they did was they actually broke it up and did things like why I treat children, what I'm passionate about, how I try to make a difference, and then sort of over like in their medical research, this particular doctor doesn't have the other pieces, but they've got medical interest here, which is kind of your traditional taxonomy list. And so but if you decided, hey, we want to go a different route, so like here, this is UNC, and you can see they've got everything on one page. They've got the sticking button here. So if I decided I wanted to, flip down to patient feedback, I want to come back up to education, about section. So they have different ways of sort of designing this and highlighting what the doctors want to highlight. Brigham does it a little bit differently. Let's find somebody here. So they've got, same kind of design, but a little bit different as far as like where they're putting the information and how they're doing that. So, and then, of course, you've got, I'll show you one that's got a video. So, for example, here, this is UCSD, and they've got their videos. This actually has a carousel. So if Dr. Abrams had a second or a third video, there'd be almost like a YouTube kind of look to it, where it would, in fact, have multiples, and you could click on them and watch them. So, yeah.
Now, are all these subdomains for these for the physician search and for the physician bios, does that live on the doctor.com platform, or are these being pulled in to the different various websites via web app call or something like that?
So the platform itself sits on our servers. The URL is a CNAME redirect. So you're setting up a subdomain and redirecting. We're redirecting our URL to yours. And what we have found is that by doing it that way, having the user friendly you can see the SEO friendly URL there with the name and specialty and location. And then working with you on with APIs. So we have a full set of APIs that come out of our system, being able to integrate the doctors throughout your site in places like service line pages and other places like that, maybe service pages, procedure pages. What we find is that the SEO value is really, really high from that. So you get a lot of benefit from it. We've not had any challenges at all. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
So, and let's see. I can try to find some other examples for you, but that kind of gives you an idea. The answer is that the front end is designed however you want us to design it.
Okay, and that's something that we work with you guys on, and we go through a design process, and we would work together, and you guys would implement. Is that that's the way it works?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We'll put together comps. Very often we'll even put together clickable wireframes for people to be able to play with and see. And then once we have agreement, that's when we'll actually get into the execution on the web. We'll stand it up on a staging site, let you play with it and tweak it from there. And then once everybody's happy, we'll launch.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, good afternoon. Is there an agent or support view of this app, or would it be identical to this?
Great question. Yeah, great question. The answer is yes, we can have multiple views of the directory. So you might have a call center view that's going to have different search criteria. Maybe it has access to different information. So you might have things like back office numbers and cell phone numbers and NPI numbers and things like that. So we can have different versions of this, and the database can house all of that data and only present it in various views. TriHealth is actually a really good example of that. They've got one internal view that their HR department uses that has a lot of the internal, only kind of information in that. So, and actually, that actually reminds me though, because you use the word support, not because it's really necessarily your question. But one of the things that is very different about kind of how Doctor.com functions is that we put a lot of our emphasis on execution after the slick sales pitch is over. So it's, once you're in-house and working with us, we actually have probably one of the most well-built out client success teams in the industry. So we're not stacked with a bunch of college kids who have FAQs in front of them. We have full stack developers on the client success team. It's backed up by our CIO is regularly involved in kind of integrations and such. We have EHR specialists who've been doing this for 15 years for integrating with EHR. We have SEO and data analytics experts. Matter of fact, I was just talking this morning with Glenn, who's one of our SEO and Google Analytics experts, and you could talk to UNC, and the work he does for them is amazing. He helps them figure out, they have campaigns that they're running right now. Actually, I don't know if they're still running this one, but the one that I most remember is they were running one called Winning in Wake. And the idea is in Wake County, it's a very competitive county. They're trying to beat Wake Forest and a lot of places like that. And so we were helping them identify what are people searching on in locations and keywords. And then let's start doing things to make sure that your doctors and your locations and such are showing up highly. And then let's track all of that so we can show that, how you are winning in Wake, because that was something that was going all the way up to the C-suite. Let's show metrics on that. Let's show conversions, increases in conversions, and they have seen dramatic improvement since we've been working with them. And that's because of the fact that we really put a lot of our energy into what happens post-close, if you will. And so I'm very proud of our client success team. They're really good.
So you can have different views, you call it views, I guess, for call center versus our network versus our hospital website versus
Correct.
Same
Correct. Yeah. If we wanted to have one database, but we ended up deciding that either in the short term or the long term, there was actually going to be two different websites, and you're going to have Palmetto and you're going to have GHS, and they were just going to be separate for some period of time. We can actually have one database driving both of those views and have them completely separate. So.
Thank you. And last question: is there a potential to have a chat feature built into this to add an additional layer of an additional pathway for patients who are looking for support?
Yeah, I want to say Brigham actually had, let me see if they've still got it. They had a chat feature built into theirs. Looks like they've gotten rid of it because they couldn't man it. I think they were having a hard time manning it. But yeah, if we wanted to have a chat, if there was a chat widget you wanted to integrate, we can integrate it. And if we wanted to build one that was into it, I mean, honestly, chat widgets at this point are sort of commodities. So we have actually talked about building chatbots. But yeah, we can. It's probably, to be honest with you, the faster, simpler thing for you is probably to find one you like, and we'll just integrate it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Her face is really big on the screen. It just so good. Any other questions? front end, back end data taxonomy, process for project implementation.
How big are you guys?
In what way?
Employees?
So we have about 130 people. So we have roughly 30 or 35 in Atlanta. There's about 70-ish in New York. We have people in, we have about a dozen people in Cupertino over in Silicon Valley. And then we have a few people scattered throughout the U.S. So all tallied up about 130.
About how many customers?
About 150, so it depends on how you count them. So it's about 110 accounts, which represent 150 to 200 hospitals. And some of them are actually like community health systems in Nashville, where we've started with them and we've rolled out 10 of their hospitals. And they've got 180, something like that. So like we're rolling those out. So, but that would be technically one client.
Privately held.
Mm-hmm. We are. If you're looking for a round of investment, you can come talk to us. So, but yeah, no, we actually just we just went through a round Series A at the end of 2016, and then did like an A2 midway through 17. To bring the two companies. So my company originally was Connect Healthcare, and so one's based out of Atlanta, and Doctor.com and Connect Healthcare merged in mid last year. That was where A2 came from. So, in case you wanted that extra detail.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
What's the most unique thing that one of your customers has done with your solution?
One of the most unique things. So I think probably the most unique thing that, well, all right, let me give you two answers. The most unique thing that we do is the fact that we act as that central repository and have all of the solutions in one. A lot of times, part of the premise behind why we came together as a company was because there's a general situation for vendor management in most hospitals where you've got 7 or 8 or 9 different vendors doing things that we can do under one roof. And it just simplifies the process significantly. So UNC works with us in this capacity, UCSD, folks like that, being able to streamline that vendor management saves them money and frankly, the headache of trying to coordinate all of those different players. As far as the most unique thing that a client has done with us, that's a good question. I want to say, I don't know. Let me think about that because I want to get you a real answer. I don't want to get you something off the top of my head.
Has anybody tied e-visits into this, like looking for a position, but there's something that's you can take care of this by clicking here right now?
You know what? Nobody has. We've had a lot of people talk about it. It's doable. It's not that, to be honest with you, it's not even a technical challenge. It's just a matter of having the e-visit staffed. If you can staff it, now I know like Providence, for example, Providence Health and Services, they're big on telemedicine, and so they've been building that up, and they've talked about putting that in the health plan as well, and so it's doable. It's doable. But yeah, no, I think as far as that stuff goes, not many people have done it, and it's mainly a logistics issue. Yeah. We have talked about some of the stuff like you've probably seen, Piedmont down in Atlanta has that little chat bot thing that they do. Problem is it's really a cruddy, like if you go use it, it's not very useful. And it's because most chat bots aren't really all that smart. And so it's, we're not really convinced that that's necessarily the way to go.
They have Iris as well.
They do. Yeah, so there's a company, so Matt Gove, who's this chief marketing officer down at Piedmont, I don't know if he makes this publicly, it's certainly public knowledge, but I don't think he promotes it at all. Loyal, the company who does that little chatbot widget, he sits on the board. He's one of the owners. So they implemented that because he has the capacity to and then give them some notoriety. It's kind of a self-promotion thing, but they do also use Kairos for the back end of their taxonomy. And like I said, Kairos has a great product. They don't have the location taxonomy, so it creates problems for people. They also don't have the flexibility on the front end to be able to do a lot of the stuff that you're going to want to do from a customization standpoint. And then the other piece of it is with the taxonomy we already have built in, and what we're building in with health grades. Quite frankly, we'll have a better taxonomy than they do.
They do also have listings management, which is something that we haven't done yet. That's pushing out this pristine information to all the third-party sites, so people can find our doctors better.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have it all in one package.
Yeah, and the location data will be affected by that. Like if you're trying to push it out and you don't have location entities, it's going to be a problem. So.
Right.
What happened yesterday?
Pricing, but Tim got to me that earlier. So we can definitely talk about that and kind of work through it. But it basically comes down to what do we have to do on the front end, what do we have to do on the back end, and kind of work through the scope. So.
Thank you.
Great.
Very cool.
Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Palmetto.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Fill it out, mail it to you.